When private text messages become public and new video evidence resurfaces, even the most carefully managed narratives can begin to fracture. In the middle of an escalating legal battle involving Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni, an unexpected figure has found herself pulled into the conversation: Taylor Swift. Publicly, Swift has maintained that the case does not involve her, that she is focused on her life, her family, and her work. But behind that distance lies a growing trail of documents, depositions, and media reports that suggest the story may be more interconnected than it appears. As outlets like the New York Post and Daily Mail circulate headlines about released texts and shifting loyalties, questions are emerging about public perception, influence, and how narratives are shaped long before they ever reach a courtroom. At the same time, released footage from It Ends With Us, now viewed from a new angle, is prompting renewed scrutiny of earlier claims and defenses. This documentary-style analysis examines how evidence, testimony, and media framing intersect, and how figures on the periphery of a case can suddenly become central to its interpretation. As popularity metrics fluctuate and previously unseen material comes to light, one issue remains unresolved. Where does distance end and involvement begin when truth unfolds in public? As the legal battle surrounding Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni intensified, Taylor Swift appeared determined to position herself outside the fallout. According to sources cited by the New York Post, Swift has emphasized that the dispute does not involve her, framing the situation as something she is consciously stepping away from. Publicly, the message is one of indifference, a pop star focused on her personal life, her family and friends, and her career rather than courtroom drama. But this posture of distance has not gone unquestioned. The reason is simple. Private text messages connected to the case have already become public, directly linking Swift to moments behind the scenes. These released texts show her reacting to developments involving Baldoni, including reports tied to a controversial New York Times article that portrayed him negatively. While Swift has not commented directly on the contents of those messages, their existence complicates the idea that the situation is entirely removed from her orbit. Media coverage quickly picked up on this tension. The Daily Mail echoed claims that Swift was unconcerned about the controversy, reinforcing the image of deliberate detachment. Yet, at the same time, separate reports noted that Taylor Swift's popularity rating had begun to shift. According to a poll conducted earlier this year, her favorability had declined compared to the previous year, a change that reportedly began even before the release of the controversial texts. Whether those numbers are meaningful or coincidental is open to debate. Swift's status as a billionaire pop star means her public image is influenced by many factors, including album cycles, touring schedules, and media exposure. Still, the timing has fueled discussion about how association, even indirect, can affect public perception. There is also the question of motivation. Some observers believe Swift's distancing reflects frustration, suggesting she may feel used by Blake Lively during earlier stages of the conflict. Others argue the response is purely strategic, a calculated effort to avoid becoming further entangled as scrutiny grows. What's clear is that silence, like speech, carries meaning. In high-profile disputes, choosing not to engage can shape a narrative just as powerfully as a statement. And as more information surfaces, Swift's attempt to stand apart becomes not just a personal choice, but part of the story itself. As the public narrative continued to take shape, attention shifted to a new development: video evidence released by Justin Baldoni's team. This footage was not entirely unfamiliar, A version of the same dancing scene had surfaced roughly a year earlier, but this time it appeared from a new angle, offering additional visual and audio context that had not been seen before. The newly released behind-the-scenes footage shows Baldoni and Blake Lively preparing for an intimate scene on the set of It Ends With Us. What stands out is the presence of a clear consent discussion. In the clip, Baldoni explains each physical action before performing it, including when he plans to lean in and remove his hat. Lively responds affirmatively, acknowledging what is about to happen. This exchange, captured on recorded audio, contrasts sharply with later claims that consent was absent or ignored. The footage also includes the moment that became a focal point in the lawsuit, the comment about Lively smelling good. When heard in full, the context changes. The conversation references spray tan and body makeup, with Baldoni appearing to reassure Lively rather than make a personal remark. In isolation, the phrase carried weight. Within the full audio, it becomes far less clear-cut. Observers who attended a recent hearing, including commentators from outlets like Popcorn Planet, noted that Lively's legal team had emphasized repeated assertions that Baldoni never sought permission during physical scenes. The newly surfaced footage directly challenges that framing, raising questions about how earlier interpretations were formed. Equally important is what the footage represents legally. This is not a stylized clip or promotional material. It is raw B-roll, never intended for public viewing. As such, it offers a candid look at on-set dynamics, one that may complicate simplified narratives built after the fact. Rather than resolving the dispute, the footage introduces friction between allegation and documentation. In legal cases, perspective matters, and sometimes a shift in angle, literal or figurative, can reshape how events are understood. With this release, the discussion moves beyond interpretation and closer to examination, forcing viewers to reconcile claims with what is now visibly and audibly recorded. Beyond individual clips and commentary, the dispute increasingly hinges on a broader question: how consent is defined and evaluated on a professional film set. This issue came into sharper focus after the unsealed deposition of the film's intimacy coordinator, Liz Talbot, was released. Her testimony directly addresses several core claims raised in the lawsuit. According to Talbot, she personally explained the meaning of boundaries and consent to Blake Lively early in production. She outlined her role clearly, emphasizing that her job was to ensure actors felt safe and supported during intimate scenes. Talbot testified that she invited Lively to raise concerns at any time and offered to adjust or remove anything that made her uncomfortable. Importantly, she stated that no follow-up concerns were ever brought to her attention. Talbot's testimony also addresses allegations related to nudity. She confirmed that there was no nudity in the scenes cited, including the birthing scene. At most, she recalled a high hip line, noting that Lively wore a hospital gown, a fake pregnancy belly, and black briefs underneath. Under SAG rules and actors' union standards, Talbot explained, this does not qualify as nudity and therefore did not require a nudity writer. This distinction highlights a key divide between how situations are felt versus how they are evaluated professionally. Talbot emphasized that while emotional responses are valid on a personal level, professional standards rely on documented actions, consent protocols, and established guidelines. In her view, the scenes in question fell within those standards. The absence of an intimacy coordinator during certain moments has also been raised as a point of contention. Talbot clarified that not all scenes require constant supervision, particularly kissing scenes or light physical interactions, which are common and governed by industry norms. Taken together, the deposition complicates a narrative built around systemic disregard for consent. Rather than depicting chaos or negligence, it outlines a framework where consent was explained, boundaries were offered, and procedures were in place. Whether that framework was later reinterpreted is now central to the case. As this testimony enters the public record, it shifts the discussion away from assumption and toward documentation, forcing a closer examination of what actually constitutes violation under industry standards and what does not. As legal arguments and depositions continue to surface, another layer of the story comes from Blake Lively's own public statements. Long before the current lawsuit, Lively spoke openly in interviews about her working relationship and on-screen chemistry with Justin Baldoni. Revisiting those appearances now adds context that sits uncomfortably alongside later claims. In a widely circulated Access Hollywood interview promoting It Ends With Us, Lively was asked directly about the connection between herself and Baldoni. The exchange was lighthearted, even playful, with both Colleen Hoover and Brandon Sklenar present. When the interviewer remarked that the chemistry between Lively and Baldoni was off the charts, Lively did not dispute it. Instead, she laughed and expanded on how important intimacy and connection were to telling the story authentically. The conversation then moved into more revealing territory. Lively described moments where she took an active role in shaping intimate scenes, at one point suggesting she was even helping guide how certain interactions should unfold. The implication that she was not only participating but influencing how scenes were staged contrasts sharply with later portrayals of her as a passive participant without agency. This theme resurfaces in behind-the-scenes video footage, where Lively is seen engaging comfortably during improvised moments. In earlier released clips, she has acknowledged initiating certain actions herself, including unscripted physical interactions. These admissions complicate assertions that all intimacy was imposed or unexpected. Observers have also noted the body language displayed during press appearances. In multiple interviews, Brandon Sklenar appears physically reserved, often creating distance between himself and Lively. While body language is subjective, the consistency of these behaviors has fueled discussion about dynamics on set and off. What makes these moments significant is not their tone, but their timing. Statements made freely during promotion carry weight when contrasted with later legal framing. They suggest a working environment where collaboration, improvisation, and mutual participation were openly acknowledged, at least at the time. As these clips resurface, they raise a difficult question. How do earlier words and actions fit into a narrative now defined by harm and coercion? The answer may lie not in any single interview, but in the pattern that emerges when those moments are viewed together, without hindsight reshaping their meaning. As more testimony and interviews are revisited, attention begins to shift from isolated incidents to patterns of behavior. This broader view is informed not only by primary figures, but also by third-party accounts that offer context about power dynamics on set and during promotion. One recurring observation involves Brandon Sklenar, whose presence alongside Blake Lively during interviews has drawn quiet scrutiny. Viewers have pointed to consistent body language, physical distance, guarded posture, and visible discomfort, particularly when questions touched on intimacy or chemistry. While body language alone cannot establish intent, its repetition across multiple appearances has prompted discussion about unspoken tension. Additional insight comes from individuals who interacted with Lively outside the immediate filming environment. In deposition materials, references to Jamie Heath describe moments that raised concerns about control and communication. In one instance, Heath reportedly recalled being instructed not to make eye contact, followed by accusations that he had done so. These details, though secondary to the central dispute, contribute to a portrait of uneven power dynamics and shifting expectations. Another moment that resurfaced involves a recorded exchange where Lively jokingly commented on Justin Baldoni's appearance, suggesting he needed a nose job. For some observers, the remark landed as casual banter, For others, it carried heavier implications given the historical context in which certain physical features have been weaponized. The significance lies not just in the comment itself, but in how such remarks are selectively interpreted depending on who says them. These moments gain weight when considered collectively. Critics argue that when similar behavior is attributed to Baldoni, it is framed as misconduct, while comparable remarks or actions by Lively are dismissed as humor or improvisation. This imbalance has fueled accusations of narrative framing and selective outrage. Taken together, these third-party observations do not prove misconduct on their own. However, they highlight inconsistencies in how behavior is judged and contextualized. In complex disputes, patterns matter, not as definitive answers, but as signals that warrant closer examination. As the case continues, these peripheral accounts remind us that power rarely operates in isolation. It accumulates through influence, perception, and repetition, often becoming visible only when multiple perspectives are laid side by side. As legal arguments continue and public scrutiny intensifies, the consequences of this dispute extend beyond depositions and footage into the realm of reputation and brand image. In high-profile cases, perception often moves faster than verification, and the ripple effects can be felt long before any courtroom resolution. For Taylor Swift, the fallout has taken a measurable form. Reports citing poll numbers suggest her popularity rating had already begun to decline before the release of her private text messages, challenging claims that the controversy had no impact on public sentiment. While fluctuations in popularity are common for a billionaire pop star, the timing has kept speculation alive about how association, even indirect, can influence audience trust. For Blake Lively, the consequences appear more tangible. Images circulating online showed her lifestyle brand placed on clearance shelves at Target, a detail that quickly became symbolic of broader brand damage. Whether fair or not, such visuals reinforce the idea that public backlash can manifest in commercial spaces, turning controversy into a consumer-facing reality. Media framing plays a crucial role here. Outlets such as the New York Post, Daily Mail, and New York Times have each shaped aspects of the story through selective emphasis, headlines, and sourcing. Critics argue this reflects a wider issue with legacy media, where narratives are often established early and revisited only when challenged by new evidence. In this environment, corrections rarely travel as far as initial claims. The long-term question is whether narrative control can outweigh documentation. In past cases, carefully managed stories have collapsed once contradictory material entered the public record. Here, released footage, unsealed depositions, and resurfaced interviews continue to complicate simplified versions of events. Ultimately, the cost of narrative shaping is not paid all at once. It accumulates through erosion of credibility, shifting audience perception, and reputational wear. As this case moves forward, the public is left not with certainty, but with a growing awareness of how power, media, and storytelling intersect, and how quickly those forces can turn against the people who rely on them most. As this story continues to unfold, one thing becomes increasingly clear. Disputes like this are rarely decided by a single clip, quote, or headline. Instead, they evolve through layers of evidence, testimony, and shifting public perception. In the case involving Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni, and the unexpected proximity of Taylor Swift, the gap between narrative and documentation has become impossible to ignore. What began as selective framing has grown into a broader examination of media influence, power dynamics, and how reputations are shaped and reshaped in real time. Released footage, unsealed depositions, and resurfaced interviews now sit side by side, challenging earlier assumptions and inviting a more cautious reading of claims. None of this offers a final verdict, but it does underscore the importance of context over reaction. These cases remind us that truth rarely arrives all at once. It emerges gradually, often after narratives have already taken hold. That's why careful analysis matters, not to defend individuals, but to understand how stories are constructed and why they resonate. As new material becomes public and the legal process continues, there will be more to examine, more questions to ask, and more details to verify. If you want to stay informed as this situation develops, follow along with this ongoing documentary series, where future episodes will continue to break down the facts as they emerge.